for joining us tonight. Welcome to the first of two public engagement events concerning the Needham Street Design Guide. My name is Tyler Gabrielski. I'm the Director of Streets with DPW for the town of Needham. I'm joined by Mobility Chair Tim Bulger, as well as Snehan Perry from Tool Design Group. We have a presentation tonight that is being shared online, so we have some viewers watching at home. And there's also some questions as part of this presentation that are going to use, they're interactive questions that are going to use Menti, which has a QR code that you can use your phones to answer questions in real time. That includes the people online. They'll be able to respond to the questions using the QR code as well. I'm going to turn it over to Tim to give a rundown of what we're doing here tonight and what you can expect.
Sure. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for this first public engagement event for the Street Design Guide. As chair of the Mobility and Planning and Coordination Committee, I just want to share briefly how this project came to be and why it's important. When the committee was formed, we recognized that Needham had already been making some pretty good progress on safer, more sustainable streets and planning for more safer and sustainable streets. We have a complete streets policy from 2017, a climate action plan, roadmap, pavement management programs, and dedicated DPW and engineering departments that were already applying best practices, but also looking on ways to improve those processes. We recognize that these resources existed in different places, and there wasn't a single resource that guided every street project to the same standards or with the same goals. With support from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, we developed a scope with input from MPCC members of the Mobility Planning and Coordination Committee. That committee, we have longtime residents on that committee, new residents, prior select board members, representatives from the MBTA and Planning Board, Climate Action Committee, and those members helped develop a scope for this project, making sure it was developed within the context and history of what Needham is. We selected a nationally respected engineering firm to lead the technical work, developing the guide. They have experience developing design guides in Massachusetts and also nationally, including the guides that the committee identified as being models for this project. Their role is going to be help translate Needham's context and values and goals into everyday design and construction. The intention of the guide is to bring clarity, consistency, transparency to how the town maintains its 140 miles of streets, sidewalks, and paths. At its core, we're going to start with some goals of safety, resilience, connectivity, and equity. It isn't a plan for specific streets. It's guidance that will help the town design better projects, apply for funding more effectively, and make decisions that reflect our community's needs. It will also serve as a reference guide for residents to understand why streets look the way they do and how these decisions on design choices are being made. I want to thank the MAPC, the Tool team, town staff who spent a lot of time developing this project, and also the Select Board and various committees that preceded the Mobility Planning Coordination Committee that laid some of the framework to make this possible. And most importantly, residents who've been sharing concerns and comments with our committee and also on other projects throughout the town. Whether or not you recognize your comment being represented in this guide or elsewhere, we're listening and we're taking those comments seriously and using it to help reflect that feedback in the guide itself. And it will continue to evolve with your participation. So thank you for coming and thank you for listening online. And if you're listening later, continue to participate and comment on this and other projects in town. And so thank you. I'll hand it over to Tool.
Yeah. Hi, everyone can hear me? Okay. Thank you. All right, so thanks everyone for joining. My name is Sneha Adhikari. I'm an engineer at Tool Design, and I'm the project manager on the consulting side. Joined to me is Perry Scheinbaum. She's a project planner, and we'll be supporting the engagement side of things. And we both worked on design guides in the past, and are excited to bring our knowledge to the Needham context. As Tim mentioned before, our firm has a lot of experience with design guidance, locally in places like Newton and Boston, but also our knowledge of best practices at a federal level. We can make sure that we're bringing a forward-thinking approach to street design in Needham. So we're going to cover a few things at this meeting. We're going to talk a little bit more about the street design guide. I think Tim provided a really good summary of that. We'll go a little bit more into the guide goals that we've come up with and hear your input about it. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about project approach as well as timeline.
If I can just add, so I just want to keep everybody in the right frame of mind. So this is our first public touch point for this project, and it's mostly focused on the overall top-level goals and scope of the project, introducing what it is, what it's going to be used for. The primary method of public engagement in this setting is going to be those interactive questions I mentioned earlier, but we're also providing, as part of that, an opportunity to submit additional questions. I'll be able to take a couple of them towards the end of our presentation today, and then the rest of them will be addressed through, we have an FAQ on our project webpage I encourage you to visit. We'll be updating that with more information, and we're also planning a second public engagement where we'll go over the sort of deliverable of the project, the guide itself, when we're further along in the process and we have something to show you all that we can react to and ask specific questions about. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that we're sort of towards the beginning of this process, and we won't have a traditional sort of FAQ go around the room, but we will have opportunities for people to submit questions and get them answered.
And the FAQ is also in the flyer for those of us in person at the back. Great. Yeah, so I'll actually take it from there. It's a good kind of segue into our overall project timeline. So as Tyler mentioned, we really only just got started late summer, early fall. To kick off the project, our first kind of step was looking at existing conditions data. We also reviewed planning documents, including the Complete Streets Policy and the most recent Climate Action Plan, to try to see what we can get in terms of what has been the priorities for the town. What are some pre-identified goals that will help shape this guide so that all of the sort of work that we're doing is in cohesion with processes that have already taken place. We are planning to have 2 public forums. First of one is tonight, and the purpose of the one for tonight is more to introduce the project and the concept and the process and hear your input about that. But we will be having a second one sometime early next year to show more things that you'll all be able to react to based on the work that we'll do in the winter. So in the winter, we'll get into more defining, street typologies for streets in Needham, as well as figuring out like what kinds of design treatments are suitable for a particular type of street, given the kind of context of the area. We're planning on, taking the feedback from the second public forum, as well as work that we've been doing, and modifying it in the spring to actually get into guide development. And the goal is to have, by the end of next summer, a completed version of the guide that gets adopted by the town and then gets to be utilized by the town. All right, so Tyler mentioned that we have some interactive kind of questions that are kind of peppered throughout this presentation. This is first of the few. And this question, what word would you use to describe the character of Needham? We're asking this because what we're trying to do as part of this guide is bring best practices about street design into Needham. But what's the characteristics of Needham? What are the characteristics of Needham that are important to you all? That's going to also help shape our progress as we move along. We mentioned we had an online platform, so you can go to menti.com on your phone, enter the code that's on here, or use your camera phone to scan the QR code. If you don't want to use your phone, and if you'd rather provide written feedback, we have some comment cards that will be passed around. If you want to raise your hand for the folks in person, I think Shane is going to pass it around. Great.
Yep, so those comment cards have the same questions that will be
Yeah.
as part of the presentation. And people that are online are also able to, for those that are on Zoom, you can also use the QR code. It'll show up here, so we'll get everybody's feedback in one place.
Yep. So I'll give folks a little bit of time to, and it's one word. I think you can submit multiple responses as well. It can be 2 words. I think it allows for 2 words.
Yeah, one word.
Okay. I'm just gonna see. All right, so the nice thing about this platform is you can kind of see what people are saying. And the larger the word, the more people are saying those words. So it sounds like the suburban characteristic of Needham seems to come out and be important for people. Things like being a community-oriented community, those are coming. I love seeing kids being mentioned. We want to make sure we're designing our streets for all ages and abilities, including the youth. Any other ones? And so all the responses that have been submitted here we will have access to. So all of this will be stored. And anything that you're writing on the comment card, we can take it from you guys later. Classic, interesting.
Yeah, one of the goals of the project or part of the scope is to address the population specific to Needham. Needham has one of the highest percentage of families and children out of our peer communities. So that's definitely going into, is a big consideration in the street design guide specifically for, especially for pedestrian safety when it comes to kids walking to school and around the community.
The responsible sticks out here to me. We're doing this for a reason.
I think engaged suburban community is describing Needham in a lot of ways.
Very engaged.
Yeah. But I love seeing the community themes. I think family, community, all of those elements are kind of together in a way. All right.
And you all can continue if you we're going to move on, but if you missed that one, feel free to, you can continue to submit using the comment cards or on your phone. It'll still work.
Yep, so I'm going to move on to our next slide now and talk a little bit about why a street design guide. And I know Tim went into it, but we'll go into a little bit more detail. So I know that the town has been making progress at thinking about safety, thinking about complete streets via the Complete Streets policy and the Climate Action Plan. And for example, the Complete Streets policy says that for any kind of like new or renovated or reconstruction project, you should try to implement Complete Streets policy to the extent possible. So ensure that it's thinking about people who are walking, people who are biking, people who are taking transit, as well as people driving. But when you actually want to put that into practice, it can be difficult as to how you do that. And so a street design guide could help kind of bridge that gap and allow decision makers to have an initial framework as to what the street could look like and use that as a basis for actual design in the future. And you might have cases where there's limited right of way. You can't fit everything. But the design guide can help you, help the town think about, well, what should be the priority? Should we be thinking about like a really wide sidewalk in this area, or should it be a shared use path? Like those kinds of like guidance specific questions will be addressed by the guide. The guide will also help establish context appropriate guidance to each street. So as I mentioned, one of the big tasks for this project is we will assign a typology to all streets in the town that's fitting the context of the street as well as the land use, and that'll help ensure that we're catering to design standards and guidance that is specific to the context of the street. The town also has some internal standards. I know the engineering department has some, but it's unclear like what those are. There's no like real central place for them to exist at the moment, and it's also unclear how they integrate with state and federal best practices. So this guide will kind of bring all of those elements together so that it's all in one place and can be the guiding document.
If I could just pipe in for a second, something I mentioned earlier is there's no way for residents to get a hold of those design guidance and understand when that decision was made or how it's being made.
Right.
So putting that in a document that's available to everyone is an important part of this project.
Right, which is the last point here, is like, this guide will exist online, accessible to residents, and then you'll have more of an insight and transparency into like maybe how certain design decisions are made. Like why does a curb ramp need to have like this kind of specification? Well, it's laid out in the ADA, and we need to follow the ADA for reasons. And so those kinds of things that maybe are not spelled out anywhere, it'll exist in this guide. And then finally, this guide could also be a catalyst for any new policies that the town might want to adopt that aligns with the transportation goals that exist at the moment. And so if we want to go a little bit more detailed, what the guide will do is it's going to provide general guidance principles and design principles. So what do I mean by that? There's an example on the right with the image here. This is taken from the Newton Street Design Guide. There's a lot in there, but it's showing sidewalk design and how all the elements that go into that. And you can see that the width of the sidewalk, the material of the sidewalk, all of those details are different based on the type of the street, different based on land use. So the Needham guide will do something similar, won't look exactly like this, but it'll show like, okay, if we are thinking about a sidewalk design on this type of street, these are sort of the minimum widths, these are the recommended widths. But I will say that like all of this is guidance, so actual implementation and actual design will be its own step, so it'll still have that flexibility built in. The guide will also establish design priorities for future projects, so things like if we have a few streets slated for repaving, few streets slated for reconstruction because the pavement quality is bad. It can be a starting point for decision makers to say, okay, like we're trying to reconstruct the street, where should we start in terms of what needs to be in the street? It'll also be a living document. The intent is for the guide to be updated periodically to reflect any changes that might be occurring in the town in terms of their goals, and also any like changes in best practices that may be evolving. And we thought it would be helpful to also talk about what the guide will not do. So the guide is providing general design principles and priorities, but it's not going to include or recommend specific designs for specific streets. This is a high-level document. It's intended for decision makers to like help get started on it, but the actual design of a specific street will have its own process, its own engagement process. And you can think about it like an actual street design requires so many more metrics. Like you need to know the existing conditions, you need to know how it's being used in a more nuanced way. So while this design guide is going to like provide a starting point, there's going to be a separate process for actual design of streets in the town. It's also not going to identify specific streets for reconstruction. That's a separate process. And then, kind of reiterating here, we're not looking to redesign every street in Needham. We just want to be aspirational and forward-thinking about what the designs could look like and use that as a basis to be able to do design in the future. And then finally, we're not replacing the Complete Streets policy or the climate action plan that exists. We're actually, we'll talk about it in our goals. We very much aligned our goals to those documents and have been building off of it.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, it's really important to understand that this is essentially a template document, and it's compiling things that are being done now during the design process, but are being done sort of as in silos on an ad hoc basis. So what we're looking to do is create sort of a compendium and formalization of existing town policies and procedures for street design, and then use those templates as a starting point for when those projects arise. Typically, that's going to come up as we're planning for maintenance on a given road, or if there's opportunities for funding for certain projects. So it's very, important. We just want to underline that this isn't a design with specific design elements for specific streets, as much as it's a classification project, a compilation project, and setting standards for street design.
Thanks, Tyler. Oops. All right, so we're putting it back to another interactive question, and this one I think should be a fun one. We're asking you all online as well as in person, what is your favorite street in Needham and why? And, based on what we've talked about before, about what the purpose of the street design guide is, I really want you to think about what makes your favorite street in Needham great. Like, what are the things that, to you, make a great street? Because, knowing that and knowing your perspective will also help us understand what can be specific to Needham as we develop the guide. So again, the same Mentimeter link there with the code. You can also scan the QR code. And for those who wanted to write on a comment card, there's a response sheet there. Yes, question number 2 on that one.
Yeah, it's on the last
Oh,
question.
okay, wait. Oh yeah, I have to move it. Sorry. Here we go. Is that working now? Yeah. Yeah, sorry, let's go back to that. I think it'll still work if I go back, right? Oops. Here we go. Got it? Okay, perfect.
We're going to
We're gonna collect it at the end.
collect them at
Yeah.
the end.
Great. Getting some responses. Seems like having greenery is one of the bigger reasons so far.
Got some love for Fair Oaks Park and Harris.
Yeah. Beautiful center green, yeah.
Great Plain Avenue, because I can drive or cycle down and like that I can drive and cycle down it. So that's part of that
Yeah.
complete streets idea, is that you have options. People seem to love the grassy medians. And the town may have an opportunity in the future for roads that have enough roadway width for
sorry.
medians and beautification projects.
Chapel Street, love Chapel Street here.
A lot of love for Chapel Street.
I think they were eating over there earlier, so.
Yeah.
It's that nice.
Yeah, we went to Cook Needham. Okay. All right, so you can keep adding your responses until we sort of change to the next question here, but some themes that come to mind, I think a lot of people are enjoying streets where there's greenery and there's more ability to walk around as pedestrians and feel safe. Some mentions of being able to bike, and some mentions of not having enough bike lanes. So good to know.
And there's also, it seems that, it's not all about the actual pavement or the sidewalk. There are amenities, greenery, trees being chief among those, that contribute to the feel of a street and the experience of using a street. Those are things that will be addressed as part of the guide, along with the more traditional road elements.
Yep. All right, so we'll keep moving here and talk next about some of the goals that we've identified for the street design guide. Again, this was informed by prior planning documents, conversations, with the town, with the MPCC, as well as just goals that kind of make intuitive sense, so based on the context of the town and what we've been hearing from folks in town. And so there's 4 sort of overarching principles and goals that we've identified for the guide: safety, resilience, connectivity, and equity. We'll go through sort of what we mean by all these things for each slide. And number 1 is safety is really the foundation of our guide. We know that safe streets is a priority for town residents, and we are aware that there's issues with higher speed. There are always concerns about access to schools and young people feeling comfortable on our streets, to name a few issues. And a safety being the foundation of the street design guide will ensure that we are looking at that at the forefront of our recommendations. And you can achieve safer streets through many means. The US DOT has a safe systems approach that they've adopted, and what that really means is when we think about safety, we can't assume people are always going to make the right calls. We're human, we make mistakes, but if people make mistakes, it shouldn't lead to severe crashes or fatalities. That's what we want to avoid. And we can do that if we manage vehicle speeds. The graphic on the right, you can see that as vehicle speeds are going up, what it does is it narrows the cone of vision for the driver, it takes them longer to stop, and when there is a collision or a crash, it means that there's more severe outcomes, especially for if you are a pedestrian, for example. And so the survival rate is really low with 20 miles per hour over the when it's 40 miles per hour versus 20 miles per hour. So that's a clear demonstrated research that's happened, and so managing vehicle speeds is one of the ways to achieve safer streets, a really big one. Ensuring that we're designing safer intersections and crossings is another one. We don't want it to be a situation where you have a really nice sidewalk, but it ends up in an intersection that makes it really difficult for people to cross. Or an intersection where the curb radius is super, super wide, and it makes people go fast and make turns that is not suitable for the context of the area. Separating travel modes where appropriate. When there's too many cars on the road, when there's a lot of speed, it's more comfortable to have your own sidewalk or your own bike lane. So separating modes when appropriate is part of it too, and really planning for that human error element. So those are all ways to achieve safer streets, and will be used to sort of inform the street design guide safety goal.
One of the reasons why safety is such a key part of the street design guide is because research has shown that one of the primary levers for enhancing safety is through street design and the actual built environment. Signage and enforcement do help on the margins, but the best way to slow people down, for instance, is through thoughtful street design that encourages people to drive at a safe speed and drive at a speed that feels comfortable, and not try to slow down drivers through signage or enforcement as a primary method.
Great point. Moving along to our second goal, which is resilience. And when we are talking about resilience here, there's two things that we're talking about. One is the climate challenge, as well as sort of the economic challenges that exist in the town. We know that in the recent years, and there's been incidents of flooding, more ponding, and kind of drainage issues in the town, and that's affected a lot of residents and businesses. This was acknowledged in the Climate Action Plan, which calls out for more resilient infrastructure in the town. And so noting that that's been a key theme and a key concern, the design guide will include strategies that will help mitigate some of those challenges and make the streets able to withstand them. So that can be done via stormwater design, like rain gardens, maybe seeing if we can include permeable pavers, just design that will ensure that water gets absorbed and not just in our homes or on the roads, and doesn't make it back to polluted water doesn't make it down to the river, but it gets like absorbed into the ground. Things like tree canopy also help with reducing issues of heat island effect, which is another concern that's been rising. And then another key part of this is the economic resilience. Like we want our Needham businesses to be thriving. We want people to want to go there and hang out and be a space that is enjoyable. So the street design guide can include those strategies that make it more pleasant, whether it's more pleasant walking experience or more pleasant amenities like things like benches and other ways, street trees, to enhance that public realm that makes it more likely for you to support the business and want to actually hang out there. So those are the two ways in which we're thinking about resilience as it relates to the design guide. And now I'll pass it off to my colleague Perry to talk about the other two.
Thanks, Neha. So connectivity is also another really important goal that we wanted to focus on. Obviously, as you're going to wherever destination you're going to, you want to be able to go from one place to another, or be able to get there safely and by whichever means of travel you'd like to go. So that means kind of making sure that our sidewalks are connected, our trails are connected, transit is connected to where you need to go through sidewalks. If there are bus stops, making sure that no matter what mode of transportation you're using, it feels continuous, that you can get from where you need to go to another place. And that's really important whether you're doing this for leisure or to go to your appointments or just general activities. So that's something that we really wanted to focus on here, ensuring that in this design guide accounts for that connectivity. And our fourth goal here is equity. And so as we've heard from folks who've already put into the comments section, people think of Needham as being a family-oriented community with children, older adults as well, and we want to make sure that we're designing our streets to ensure that people, no matter their age, ability, economic status, that they're able to get to where they need to go safely and comfortably. So that includes ensuring that senior housing and schools are connected and folks are able to get to where they need to go and to their destination safely. So we're wanting to be sure that this design guide and all the streets that we're designing for are comfortable and safe and ensure equitable access to all individuals. So with these four goals, we have, again, it's equity, resilience, connectivity, and safety. And so there were kind of four overall buckets, but we really would like to hear from all of you if there's anything that we're specifically missing. If there's anything specifically that we're missing or that you would like us to include.
QR.
Yeah, she's just having to.
I didn't realize the QR was not in this, so I'll let you do that again. Sorry.
Oops.
Yeah. Oh, that was something called, it's like called Bike Town. It's called different things. Sometimes they take a parking lot and then they stripe out markings to kind of teach kids about traffic safety rules. Yeah. It's fun.
There's one in Boston that was recently built, so.
I'm gonna see what folks are saying here.
Yeah, this is one of the primary pieces of feedback we'd like to get from the public as we are in this stage of the project where we're really It's still a bit of a broad umbrella as we identify these goals, but we also want to make sure that we're not missing anything that the community feels is important. Yep, so we have safety.
You can go to that, like, bigger slide up there.
Yep. Safety, resilience, connectivity, and equity.
Got it.
All right. We have community engagement, public engagement is coming up. Balancing the goals is a challenge. That's something that we're very conscious of. You know, you can't, we try to make sure that we can incorporate as many of these goals and balance them as much as we can. Transit time.
That's a tough one.
What does that mean? Yeah.
Maybe transit reliability and how it, whether or not it comes on time. That's probably what folks meant.
Yeah, it just means tough to
Tough, yeah.
influence the MBTA, you know, for transit, but.
Yeah.
Employing best practices, so that's, I mean, that's really what this project is all about, is formalizing those best practices and bringing them in a transparent way to the public so that they can see what those how those best practices are informing our decision-making. Yep, and one person had submitted that bike accommodation, you know, bike infrastructure fits in under safety and connectivity. Operational costs and maintainability, that's definitely a big consideration for us in DPW. Anything that we build, we have to make sure that we maintain it and we're able to keep it working as it should for residents in the long term.
I do think the design guide will speak to standardizing some of the construction practices to help kind of make sure that those costs are easily able to be anticipated and mitigated if possible. If we know in the, you know, coming up to it what we need to do, I think it will help kind of in general with that as well. Yeah.
And I think, like, we talked about how the guide will incorporate existing standards, and that's part of the ensuring that, like, maintenance is occurring. We're kind of making sure the guide isn't recommending things that is, like, not possible to be done by town staff. Like, we'll have to cater it to what the town is able to do.
Yeah, someone had commented that about saving the town money in the long term. I think that having a template for design can go a long way on that, so that we're not engineering from the ground up every single time. So that's one way in which having these starting points, these templates, can we're spending less staff time and money for external designers to start from zero.
All right.
Yeah, so for this one, for everyone that you know, as we move on here through the presentation, definitely want to get your comments on this and feedback. So if you answer one question tonight on your, either through Menti or on your comment card, then please do for this one.
Use of porous pavements is part of resilience. That shouldn't be mandated. And again, the design guide isn't a mandate. It's not intended to be that, but the guidance is there to help suggest that is a best practice when doing something. So if it can be recommended in the design guide and it's feasible for a project, then it can be used in that manner.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the project approach and kind of what our next steps will be in the process. We've spoken a lot, I think, hopefully, today about how this is not a prescriptive process. This is going to be really kind of a blueprint for the town of Needham. And so that's going to be based off of kind of starting off of looking at national and state guidance. So this is kind of a lot of alphabet soup here on the screen, but so national and state guidance, there's something called AASHTO, which is kind of the the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. So they kind of have like a whole document on best practices and recommendations. NACTO is also another one that's focused more, it's the National Association of City Transportation Officials. So those are kind of countrywide guidance, and then MassDOT obviously has some standards as well, and so that's something that we'll be looking at and reviewing, as well as some best practices for research as well. And so that will kind of be the baseline when we'll start building off of that. But really we'll be, again, really focused on using the local context here in Needham. Obviously, we want this guide to be helpful and useful to all of you and to the town. So this example on the right is from Newton, and so as we were kind of talking about design typologies, street typologies for here, and so what they used here is kind of the typical street classifications for designing and kind of using those street typologies. So that might be something that we decide to do for Needham. Again, it's kind of looking and assessing that to first look at the best practices and then go ahead and classify those to then develop these guidelines.
Yeah, I definitely recommend checking out Newton's street design guide, because the goals and the scope of that project are fairly similar to the ones that we're working with on this project. You know, more similar to us in character than some of the more urban environments. So for a kind of a preview of what you might expect, take a look on that. You can, if you search Newton street design guide, there's a page of a bunch of different transportation plans that come up, and you'll be able to find it there.
And so in addition, once you have the framework for the street typologies, there are also then these next level of design topics, which we've kind of discussed a little bit through the goals. But these things will be including like sidewalk design, accessible design, travel lane, and traffic calming. So sidewalk design might include a typical width for one of these street typologies, depending on if it's an arterial, let's say, in this case, or a collector. It might be a minimum width of a sidewalk might differ. And then there's also material that could be concrete, pervious pavers, things like that. And then we also have like traffic calming is also another example here. There are a variety of different traffic calming measures and design treatments. And so this example here and this photo here, you can see these what we call curb extensions, where it allows drivers to be able to see pedestrians more clearly by essentially making the road a little bit narrower and putting pedestrians front and center so that drivers can easily see if there's anyone crossing. So this might be something that would be a recommendation or a suggestion of a potential design strategy for a specific street. But again, these are not prescriptive. It just would be a potential option for that.
Just one more thing.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, we get at DPW, we get a lot of questions about our decision-making in terms of what materials we're using in different parts of town, whether that be, why is there concrete sidewalk here and asphalt sidewalk here? This guide will speak to some of those questions and create more transparency in that sort of unspoken policy, so that people understand why we make those decisions, especially as it relates to maintenance.
And Yeah, so here are a few additional design topics that might be included: intersection and crossing design, bicycle infrastructure design, and stormwater management. And I've seen a few comments in the chat about bike infrastructure. Again, there might be a lot of interest or confusion as to why there are certain bike lanes where, and so this is also another opportunity for specifying the type of bike lanes, if it's one-way, two-way, and so on and so forth. And then also things like the stormwater management. I think this is a really good opportunity to kind of integrate stormwater into the street. And as Sneha was saying before, it's really important to design streets that can hold water and can contain the environment as it is. And so ensuring that that Needham streets are resilient to extreme climate events. So that might be something like, again, bioswales, shade trees, and ensuring that there's, again, reasoning behind what certain street typology might include it as a recommendation, or and so on and so forth.
And I think I'll add that, like, you know, what the design guide will include are considerations. Like, if you were to, you know, implement a rain garden, these are the considerations. This is, you know, what you'll need to look out for, and then these are the times where this will be appropriate. So we've been talking to, for example, Tom on the engineering team, and they have created a map that shows like the impact of flooding in the town, and maybe what our guide could say is like those areas are like a greater priority for this type of design. So like the guide can help with that level of decision making as you start coming with initial design, and then the actual, how do you actually do the stormwater water management? There's so many ways to do it, so it'll include like general guidance around that. And then the image on the right here is kind of showing like how all these things can exist together. You can have like a nice tree canopy with stormwater infrastructure, with parking, with bike lanes, and like there's ways in which those things can work collaboratively together, given the context of the street and the design decisions around the street.
So just kind of wrapping it back to this timeline. So now that you've kind of seen what we have done and what we will be doing. So again, tonight is our first of 2 public forums. After today, we'll kind of listen to all of your comments and feedback, take that into account. We'll then move into street classification, so developing some of those typologies and design elements. And then in our next public forum, which will be in kind of late winter, early spring, we'll bring that forward for public comment and feedback, and then take that into consideration as we then develop the final street design guide, and then hopefully go back to the town select board to then adopt the design guide. And at the next public forum meeting, we're just giving a little preview of what you can expect. So again, we'll just kind of report back what we've heard from today's public forum. We'll also kind of start presenting some of the design typologies, street typologies, some of the designs as well, elements as well. Again, nothing is prescriptive. It's all going to be more of a blueprint, and so it's more of a way for you all to kind of respond to potential options for what will be.
Yeah, so ultimately this project is managed by DPW, but is being overseen as well through the Mobility Committee. And the Mobility Committee, in their function as making recommendations to the Select Board, will take this design guide, and then it will be presented to the Select Board and recommended for adoption. At that point, the Select Board is the ultimate decider, and they, I'm sure, will have their own questions and comments that'll be incorporated into the final product.
So yeah, with that, we'd like to just open up and ask if anyone has any questions about the project. This is kind of your opportunity to ask us questions. Again, we also will respond to some of them, I think, now, but also, as was discussed earlier, I think we'll answer a few of them online as well through the Q&A. And then if you leave here today as well and have more questions, you're welcome. We'll put at the end an email to reach out to us.
Yeah, and then if there are some questions, we may we may put them on the FAQ if there's a question that like wasn't addressed and has been a confusion. So this one,
We have to,
hold on,
yeah, we have to,
oh,
can you stop sharing for a second?
1 second. Oops.
And for those that, this presentation is going to be recorded and posted for later viewing. For those that are watching the recording and we're not able to provide feedback in real time, feel free to reach out to the Mobility Planning Coordination Committee. Our email address is mpcc@needhamma.gov. Those comments will be shared with the rest of the committee, some of which some of the members are here tonight, and we'll be able to debrief at our next meeting, which is on Monday.
Sorry, some technical issue here. I'm just trying to, would this show like the,
Just, yeah, that's cool. Sure. Oh, and then just go to the slide.
Yes?
Yeah, we're,
Go ahead, we have a minute.
oh,
start going at the bottom, you can present.
My question is, in the timeline, the planning board is not mentioned at all. Is there a role for them towards the latter part to review and have input into the design guide? And remind me, are they on the FCC?
They are, so Justin is our representative, Justin McCollum. The question was if the planning board will have input into this project and into the deliverable. There is representation on the mobility committee from the planning board. A representative, Justin McCollum, will take the feedback to the board and kind of act as that liaison through the mobility committee. The mobility committee meets monthly, and we have representatives from planning, I think as Tim mentioned, planning, transportation safety committee, as well as climate action plan committee and at-large residents as well. Is it working?
yeah, I think so.
No, I don't know what's
Ah.
going on.
Sorry.
Can you go to the, oh wait, you don't have internet.
I do have internet,
Oh.
yeah. Oops, maybe if I keep clicking on this one, it'll work. Seems like we have,
Just press present.
then that'll show.
Okay.
Any questions?
But it's back up. It's
Okay, yeah,
just switch screen.
I'll let you lead.
Okay, we got the right question up.
Yeah.
We can,
Yeah, but I want to make sure people have the QR code up.
gotcha.
Are able to.
Yes, so these are questions about the project or process.
The first one is, have you reached out to the town's disability committee to include them in the process? We haven't, but it's a good question.
Thank you for bringing that up. Obviously, there are components of the guide that are going to relate to accessibility, ramp design, for instance, on sidewalks. That's part of that accessibility component, so we absolutely will loop them into the process.
It's one of the ADA accessibility, I think, in Needham is something you'll notice. If you don't notice the design that's happening, it's a lot more frequent here than it is in surrounding towns, so we're already doing that.
Okay.
You know, at a pretty good pace, updating all those curb ramps and doing that, but it's a great question, and
Sorry, folks, I'm trying to,
Yep, the
Oh, yeah.
DPW,
seems like it's showing that question again.
one of these policies that is going to be formalized in the guide is our obligation to provide accessible sidewalks and ramps whenever we do a substantial rehabilitation on a roadway, including paving. So that's one of the obligations that we have. Some of you may have received notices in the past and seen the work that's been going on the sidewalks in advance of paving projects. The goal of being to make sure that all users are able to access sidewalks and connect to where they want to go around town. We would love to put it in just because then we'll have it in writing and we can use those as we continue the process with the design team or with the consultant team. What's that? We'll take all feedback.
I think 'cause she,
Because
She
it's a
just wants,
writing.
no,
It's a
she just
writing.
doesn't like, she wants to ask a question.
Oh,
Yeah, I understand.
We'll let James do it, so.
What's your question, ma'am?
Yeah.
When I came here with a concern about through streets that have Cape Cod berms that are really, we should have granite curbs to control parking and curb jumping. And I'm wondering, is that something, the kind of thing we'd be looking at individual streets to see whether they are safe now and recommending improvements to those streets?
So the question was relating to curbs, materials used for curbs, asphalt berm versus granite curb, as it relates to parking on the berm. So materials are a part of this project. One of the considerations that the project has is to formalize those policies that DPW already has in terms of where granite goes and where asphalt berms go. There are a couple different factors that play into that, including maintenance, including cost or feasibility. Sometimes people on a road prefer one or the other, and we don't want to be overly prescriptive or reactive to one group of residents that live on the street versus another. So we want to have consistent policy, so that's going to be part of this project. It's definitely going to be addressed in the guide. Yes, sir.
Information about what are the consequences of certain street classifications. Street is classified this and this way, what does it mean? Can it have, or does it have to have sidewalks, or sidewalks will be removed, whatever, or bike lanes, but is that, so once you classify a street in a certain way, because that may depend, that may imply that how residents respond and what do they want.
Right.
Or non-residents who want to go through that again.
Yep. So for those listening online, the question was, what follows from the classification and what design elements are recommended for those classifications?
How can people learn about that and respond to it?
Yep. So again, I will say that the project is meant to be a starting point for that discussion, a template, right? So it may say that based on the physical characteristics and usage of a particular road, this is the sidewalk profile that may be recommended. That's always going to be a discussion based on that specific street when DPW is going to be working on that street. So we're not going to just copy and paste from the guide. It's going to be a standard that we start from. So through our normal process of public engagement that we incorporate into all of our projects, obviously I'm always available. We can also funnel commentary through the MPCC, the email address I mentioned earlier, mpcc@unitedmma.gov. But every individual project on every street will go through the full process of communication just like we do now. So some of the questions that have been coming in, what is the process of street classification? Will residents be notified? Will time be given for a response? So, Sneha, do you want to speak to that and how the
Yeah.
classification is determined?
Sure. So we're actually like just kicking off that process. The classification we've done different ways. So that example that Perry mentioned with Newton, they sort of just took the sort of federal functional classification, and that's based on like roadway volumes. It's based on land use to a degree. So those are some examples of factors. So thinking about what the existing land use of the area is. Like you can think about like, a downtown setting requires a different classification than somewhere that's like not outside of downtown or in a more suburban residential area. So the classification will use metrics like land use, metrics like possibly roadway volumes, how functional classification is defined. It may also look at overlays such as, where the MPCC has like the sort of official kind of bike lane layer. It may also look at the kind of flood zone map that I mentioned earlier that the engineering department has created to kind of show where certain design elements like stormwater infrastructure will be needed. So there could be a lot of things that go into it, but those are just some examples. And we'll, as part of our second public forum, we'll be sharing out some of our results and like our take on the classification with you all, and be able to, so you can provide some input. And like I know that there's like east of the 95, there's like a more industrial area, and that requires a different like way of looking at things. So the classification is looking at some of those like contextual things to assign street types.
Yeah, so that's a large part of why that second public engagement touch point is after those classifications have been assigned. One thing that I think I want to get ahead of is that obviously there's a lot of residential low volume streets in Needham. I don't want anyone to come away thinking that we're going to be advising bike lanes, for instance, on a very low volume street. That's not something that would match to the use. I think you're going to see largely a couple major collector busy roads in town that are going to have specific guidance tailored to those roads. A lot of roads are going to be classified in that local residential low volume category. Where they are on the map, there may be some additional considerations for specific ones that, as they relate to connectivity, that might have sort of a subcategory assigned to them, and that's something that is going to fit that usage of that roadway, and it's not going to be based on what we'd like to see as much as it's going to be based on what are the physical restraints, how are people using the road, what is it connected to. So I just a lot of the roads are going to be classified under that local road umbrella.
And I will add, like, there may be some residential local streets that are being used as a cut-through, which is like not the intended use of that small local street. So maybe our data will show that there's a lot of people going fast, and there's more people than should be on that street. So the classification of it will reflect like what it should be, not necessarily always what it is at the moment, because what it is at the moment is not always like the safe scenario.
One person had asked, are streets currently classified? So that's kind of what we're using as the baseline to generate the classification is how the state and the federal definitions classify these roadways. Those are generally pretty broad, and it's really going to just have our main busy streets as a different classification than those local roadways. So what we want to do is take that and then make it a little bit more granular, a little bit more specific and useful for Needham, for our decision making. But that is the starting point, you know, so that's based off of the standards that are set at the state and federal level.
I mean, we've already looked at that a little bit and
Right.
identified areas that like, oh, this street doesn't look really, like it belongs in this classification, or, you know, these two streets are side by side and they're not the same. So we're already discussing that and
Yeah.
making sure that, you know, we just don't blanket lay what MassDOT has decided our roads are. There's a choice in here for that.
Will this process include planning for e-bike, scooters, and other types of transportation? So that is more of a policy question that I think the Mobility Committee in partnership, obviously, with, you know, making recommendations to the Select Board, I think that's something that would be considered as part of that.
Yeah, I think this
It's-
question is kind of getting at like, you know, wheeled mobility, you know, being scooters or small electric things. I think really anytime you mention bike or bike lane, that it's really more than that. So those types of things would be kind of included in anything that would be, you know, e-bikes or
Right.
regular bikes or scooters. Typically, those are just smooth surfaces for micromobility devices, which can be a variety of different things. It's not really just exclusively bicycles.
Somebody at some level somewhere does have to address this, because some of those devices travel a lot faster than regular bicycles,
Right.
and that could put the hazard. So since one of your charges is to address safety, I think that's something that we need to take into account, and maybe it's not within this design guide. You're saying that there are decisions that can be made somewhere. I can understand that. But you also have to recognize that these devices are being more widely used now. And whether they belong in the bike lane or in the motorized travel lane has to be sorted out at some point.
Yeah, the comment was relating to sort of the gray area, the safety as it pertains to e-bikes and scooters that are traveling at higher speeds than analog or, you know, manually operated. This is an issue that the state is very focused on right now. It's one of their main topics that they are tackling. They're doing a lot of public outreach on it, and I think that the town's decision-making on that will be informed by that research that they're conducting. And I think that it makes sense for us to see if we can find a place for that in this project as well. Yes, sir.
Question about the sort of the scope of the project. So once you have the design guide and you're nearly finished, would you identify the gap between where the town is at and where you're recommending, what the recommendations, what the gap is, and kind of what you would recommend for investment to get us towards more what you're recommending? Would that be within the scope of the project?
So the question was, will there be a plan, sort of an implementation plan between what is identified as a typical or sort of a recommended design? So I want to bring it back to, in terms of the scope, that we are not designing all the streets in Needham with this project. So it isn't so much of a, here is what we want to do on every street, as it is when the opportunity, the funding, DPW's maintenance planning, when those opportunities arise, where do we start? So, you know, we're not looking to build up a network map and then try to identify millions of dollars of funding in order to achieve that, as much as it is what is our plan when we get that opportunity. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and maybe I'm misunderstanding the question a little bit, so, but there's also measuring before and after the street design guide is implemented. There are other things to measure, like the speed, average speed on streets, safety, reduction in crashes, reduction in storm water issues that we have throughout town. So there's definitely, once the guide is implemented, I think there are metrics and follow-up to be had to continue to make sure that the improvements that we're trying to make here and the goals are actually being achieved afterwards. It may not be a financial thing for planning for, dollar amounts to implement it, but years or months or sometime afterwards, I think it would be prudent for the town, and I think part of something that we would recommend would be to continue to measure it.
It's just something that can be done as a follow-up, but if we identify that high value things, we might not want to wait a decade until that street is going to be paved to make some of the improvements, but maybe that's a separate effort after you guys do.
Right, so the gentleman made the comment that if there's good candidates for implementation or sort of, so one of the goals of the project is to incorporate our Complete Streets and our Complete Streets prioritization plan, as well as other documents that the town's already adopted. Part of that document, that plan does have projects that have been pre-identified. Those are used as for instance, when a opportunity arises for a grant from the state, that's the list that we go to in DPW for how we determine what the priorities are, because that plan was established through a participatory process, within the past 10 years. So we're peeling items off of that list. When funding and opportunity is available, and the funding can create opportunity as well. But obviously, it's a long time horizon when we're talking about all the streets in town. And it may be that through a product of this project is that we come out with a sort of mismatch between what's constructed there now and what we'd like to see that can identify those differences, and it may flag that for future planning. But again, this isn't a design document project specific as much as it is that formalization of our processes and classifying roads to give us that starting point. Yep.
Go ahead.
Is there any financial incentive from the state to implement this guideline or this Complete Streets project?
As it relates to grants, it is helpful because it's incorporating that Complete Streets prioritization plan that is how the state would like applications to flow from for grant funding. But it's not a prerequisite necessarily. This is going to help DPW and the town to in their planning, but it's not a prerequisite for any specific program or a recommendation specifically from the state. Does that make sense?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
So where did this project originate from? What is the genesis of this? Is this something internal, or is this something that the state has recommended that towns abide by?
So it's it's related to the charge from the select board. So the question was, is this something that the state is recommending? Is this something that, what is the impetus for the reasoning behind starting this project? The select board, in establishing the mobility committee, this was one of the charges that the select board charged the committee with, and it was intended to provide the sort of standardization of our practices in a way that is transparent and consistent across projects. So it's really from this part of the select board's charge that this is coming from. You want to add anything from that? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we identified, as a mobility committee was formed, to come up with some long-term transportation planning and goals and to assist the select board and DPW in making those decisions. And we just we looked at all of the different programs that the DPW had already, and identified a need to have some standard and transparent processes when they do street design and reconstruction. And so that's where this guide came out of from our committee. Go ahead.
So it would seem to me that a lot of the things that are going to be implemented or put into this guidebook would really be important to the Envision project. Have they had a chance to weigh in, the Envision group?
So the project is not related to the Envision project. Because obviously every road's being classified, there will be recommendations that will be shared between the project limits of that project and other similar roads in town. However, that process, because it's specific to that project and it's being looked at in obviously by a team of stakeholders, that is going to sort of take the place of it goes beyond that baseline planning and that baseline template, because we're not going to design anything specific to Great Plain Avenue through the guide. So it definitely overlaps in terms of recommendations for those types of roads as they may exist elsewhere in town. But we're not, because there's a design process that's going on that's being informed by, that has its own public process, that really overrides anything that would be recommended through this guide.
I think it's just it would be a good example of something that the design guide may recommend certain features to be included in, but the street itself the project itself has a whole different process that's going to develop what is actually happening. So, the Envision Committee and the Select Board, DPW, they have, it's just a whole different thing that will go on in that project, and the design guide will only make recommendations for it. There's no need for, it's not set in stone that the decisions that are made will be necessarily reflected of the design guide, because it's not pulling out that specific street.
Mary Ann, do you have a comment related to that? Select Board Member Mary Ann Cooley. If you'd like, you can use the mic. Right, I don't want to, trying to reiterate the questions.
4 meetings a night. I think it's important to recognize that this, 4-block, 3-block area that's right here is pretty unique in Needham. And when I think about this design guide, over the long term, this design guide may have guidance for the width of streets here, but they don't have guidance, I think, for the particular nature of these streets. Mm-hmm. I would expect that the design guide is going to help us with consistency on our streets writ large, like most of them in town, so that in the neighborhoods, we would have consistent widths of streets, for example. That's the easiest thing to talk about. And on the main arterials, that those might be more consistent as well. Right now, we have roads of all different widths, some with sidewalks, some not with sidewalks, different amenities on them, but they are quite different one to the other. So I think, as Tyler tried to say earlier, when, for whatever reason, DPW starts to work on a street to do drainage, to do something, that they will have some guidance on how that street's going to go back above ground in a basic perspective. So I just think that's useful to think about, that this is pretty special, what's going on right here, and I don't necessarily think this design guideline covers special, it covers just, how do you think generally? So 100 West is private, right, but Highland Avenue is in front of it, all right? I think for an arterial, there will be some guidelines that will be created for arterials in town about how those streets might be set up, okay? But 100 West itself has interior roads or, you know, driveways. We don't impact that with this. Yeah, so it's just in front. This could be useful for the arterial. It's not going to be ready, you know, anytime soon, but there's not anything particular to 100 West that requires that it happen immediately, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, so the public process for any specific project is always going to take precedence over the general recommendations that are going to be made in this guide. I want to make sure that we stay focused on this project just because there's lots of questions I know people have about specific projects, but in the interest of time, I want to respect everybody's time. You know, we are approaching an hour and a half on this meeting. One last thing that I want to comment on. So another stakeholder, another group that is going to be involved in this decision-making is public safety, and how they're able to maneuver and get to, you know, the access points for to perform their very important emergency services. So that's something, another group that is going to have some say in how this design guide's developed. So. It's really we want to sort of create a shared understanding, shared expectations about how the street design process goes, but any project-specific design process is going to have its own opportunities for public input. We don't have to make the decisions on every single street as part of this project.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Marianne, for speaking here. I think that every street in Needham is special. And so each time that there's a project that will come, the design guide will make recommendations for that. But that street redesign or reconstruction or repavement will have its own process that's separate from the design guide to implement it. So there will be, you know, whatever public engagement or design choices that are made that will be specific to that project, and the design guide will only make recommendations going into it beforehand.
Yes, Shane. Assistant Director of Public Works, Shane Mark.
Hi, Shane Mark, Assistant Director of Public Works. Just want to tackle a couple things for this. So once this design guide is complete, this will be a framework. So when private projects come before the town, they go through we have a design review team that is composed of many different departments. Public Works is part of that, so we are able to provide our input on how those projects could affect us. And we're also talking to the developers. So even like the example, the West Street project, DPW is having conversation with the developer of that project as well to help ask for things that we would like to see them do that will help us with the end game. So these conversations do happen. What this will really do is help guide us so that when future projects come before, we'll have a template that we can bring forward, that planning board will be able to reference, that DPW will be able to reference, that will be a template that is consistent for where these projects take place based upon, like they talked about earlier, with the different classifications or where those projects could be within the town. So it will definitely help us with that moving forward. Secondly, the question on the state. It's not a mandate by the state, but this will definitely make us a heck of a lot more competitive when we do put in for grants, because we'll have a framework. So when we have this framework that the design guy will provide to us and we submit for Complete Streets grants, it makes us more competitive because we have standards already set there to look at these projects. So it'll make us more competitive when we put forward grants for complete streets. So hopefully this will help us in being more competitive and get some of those funds from the state for that. So just wanted to reemphasize that, as I know that's some of the questions that came up tonight. So thank you.
Thanks, Shane. So to wrap it up, we do have the project page listed up here. There is a project page for the street design guide. As we continue through this process, that web page will be updated. We also are going to continue receiving feedback through the mobility committee email address, which is shown up here on the screen. We'll be looking forward to, hopefully we will see you all again at the next public engagement as we continue to work through this process, and we'll have something new to show you so that we can react to it and answer questions on it. The project team, we'll stick around for those that are here in person to answer any questions you guys may have on a one-on-one basis. Otherwise, we also have for those that were not able to participate in the Menti, the poll that was shown on the screen, we do have those comment cards, pencil and paper. We are going to be collecting those for additional feedback that we can bring back to the team and talk through what has been identified as goals that you all want us to address and to consider as we continue through the project process. I want to thank you all for coming. Thank the select board members in attendance, Shane for helping us out, members of the Mobility Planning Coordination Committee for joining, as well as Tool Design. Thank you all. Have a good night, and we will stick around for some more questions as we wrap up here.
Thank you.
Thanks.